Be sure to check out my second channel called Rob Explains. There you can check out videos where I explain things outside of comic books. Throughout the 1920s, Dell publications served as the industry standard on print media. Led by a syndicated series of newspaper strips called Famous Funnies, these publications were the go-to source for comedy, satire, and adventure. But a new age was emerging, one which would force Dell publications out of the limelight as a competitor emerged with a flagship character that would change print media forever. By 1952, the success of Superman and Superboy was undeniable. The Man of Steel had captured the imagination of millions, and his comics stood on shelves around the country. Conversely, Superboy had provided fans with the life of Clark Kent between his arrival on Earth and the time he became Superman. However, the popularity of superheroes was rapidly fading to be replaced by science fiction comics and invaders from outer space. Attempting to keep up with the changing times and revitalize interest in superheroes, under the direction of DC editor Julius Schwartz and writer Gardner Fox, best known for creating characters like the Green Lantern Alan Scott, the Flash Jay Garrick, and the Justice League predecessor, the Justice Society of America, DC effectively rebooted their continuity for the very first time, bringing an end to the Golden Age, starting the Silver Age, and by extension, expanding on the world and capabilities of Superman. With the United States in the midst of the Cold War with the Soviet Union following the end of World War II, under the Eisenhower administration, the idea of space exploration was rapidly coming to be a reality. While man would not land on the moon until 1969 under the presidency of Richard Nixon, because space travel was as much an ingrained part of science fiction as it was a legitimate possibility, the Silver Age powers of Superman grew to reflect these technological advancements and included traveling to the depths of space, as well as massive expansions to his host of abilities including super hearing, super speed, and super strength. However, for many fans, there seemed to be no explanation as to how these abilities were so much more enhanced than they were during his Golden Age counterpart, and so to answer this question, DC introduced two concepts. The first was the Multiverse, and the second was the Yellow Sun. With the Superman and Superboy titles coming under the control of legendary editor Mort Weisinger in 1957 as part of DC's attempt to relaunch their characters and provide fresh backstories, Weisinger delegated a number of changes to the Superman mythos and in doing so, established much of the content that exists today. The task of expanding on the mythos was both easy and difficult. Because Superman was so popular, like the Grey Gold Rush of 1849, DC found itself inundated with prospective writers and artists looking to make a name for themselves by receiving their moment in the spotlight. On the other hand, Superman fans guarded their hero with jealous eyes and were avidly against anyone making changes that deviated too far from the original content. Looking to find a balance by appealing to new fans and appeasing old fans, where early stories stated that Superman's powers were tied directly to his physiology in addition to Krypton's gravity in relation to Earth, and where Superman issue number 53 introduced Jor-El as the father of Superman, and issue number 146, which served as part of DC's Silver Age retelling of the origins for their various characters, Weisinger rolled these elements over and introduced Krypton's Red Sun as a reason for not only why Kryptons didn't have powers on their own planet, but more so than that, explained the basis behind Superman's new abilities. As it was explained, the gravity of Krypton was several times more intense than Earth, and so when Superman arrived, the difference in gravity allowed for both super strength and flight. In addition to this, the ultraviolet rays emitted by Earth's yellow sun hardened Superman's skin, making it impenetrable to Earth's weapons, as well as enhancing his 5 senses, allowing him to achieve extraordinary feats. During this same year, a long-awaited team-up took place between Batman and Superman. Spearheaded by Edmund Hamilton, the father of science fiction and a writer for some of Superman and Batman's best stories in the late Golden and early Silver Ages, the team-up between the two only served to push their popularity to greater heights. As the original superhero, Superman stood atop the pantheon with incredible strength and vast abilities. But in contrast, Batman was a normal human with incredible wealth and extraordinary physical training, who represented the power of human ingenuity. Combining both characters in Superman issue number 76, which featured a story that saw the duo's attempt to stop a criminal escaping with stolen diamonds, many comic historians consider this to be one of the most important stories of the Silver Age, as this team-up served to confirm that the superheroes of DC Comics existed in a shared universe, and opened the door for a friendship between Batman and Superman, as well as laying the foundations for the introduction of the Justice League in 1956. Continuing to expand on Superman and his place within DC, in 1954 and 1958, at the direction of Weisinger, writer Otto Bender created 2 stories titled Superman's Pal Jimmy Olsen and Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane in order to focus on the Man of Steel supporting cast without sidetracking from his main stories. Because Superman was so popular, and by extension fans were clamoring for most anything that expanded on his publications, both series were extremely successful, with Lois Lane's solo series selling just below Superman and Superboy at the peak of its popularity. However, in addition to the questions regarding Superman's increased abilities between the end of the Golden Age and the start of the Silver Age, questions also remain involving the characters of Flash and Green Lantern. Because the Silver Age saw the removal of Jay Garrick and Alan Scott as their respective characters and replaced with Barry Allen and Hal Jordan without an explanation, in 1961, DC launched a story called The Flash of Two Worlds, which served to establish the multiverse, in stating that the versions of Superman and others who appeared between the dawn of DC Comics in 1938 up to the retelling of their origins in the 1950s existed in a separate universe called Earth 2, with the current versions existing in a reality called Earth 1. In addition to this, with the Justice League established in 1956 by Gardner Fox, albeit with only occasional appearances by Superman, once again under the expansive direction of Mort Weisinger, writer Jerry Coleman introduced the Fortress of Solitude with Action Comics issue number 241. Initially appearing without an explanation of how it was built, the Fortress of Solitude was designed by Superman as a place of solace and a way to keep elements of his Kryptonian heritage, but also as a tribute to the most important individuals in his life. Originally accessible by unlocking it with a giant key that could only be lifted by those with incredible strength, the Fortress of Solitude contained rooms dedicated to various villains including Lex Luthor and Metallo, but also friends like Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, and Batman. And so with the Silver Age basis for Superman established and well received by fans, and because the reception of Superboy meant that the public was open to new versions of Superman, DC looked to expand on the Man of Steel's role in their lineup, as well as tap into the demographic of women and young girls by creating a female version of Superman that wouldn't hinder his romance with Lois Lane and instead would serve as a support role to fight alongside both Superman and Superboy. Created in 1958 by Otto Binder, Supergirl's introduction actually came out of several experiments involving a female counterpart to Superman. Like the Lois Lane Superwoman of Action Comics issue number 60 in 1943, the version depicted in Superman number 123 came as an experiment by DC to gauge fan reaction to a legitimate version of Superman who was a woman. Created by Jimmy Olsen after discovering a totem that granted 3 wishes, the events also came with a compelling story centering on Lois Lane. As the main love interest of Superman, Otto Binder sought to build speculation on the possibility that Lois Lane was being replaced in an effort to drive controversy among fans and in turn, drive interest in Supergirl's introduction. As the story saw both Superman and Supergirl fighting together, it was also relatively short, in that Superman discovered a bridge washed out, he was able to save it, and discovered that the entire scenario was a trap set up by unknown criminals looking to kill Superman by exposing him to green kryptonite while he tried to save the train. With Supergirl jumping in to save Superman, her demise came about when she picked up green kryptonite not knowing the danger it represented. After being exposed to its radiation for too long, she succumbed to its fatal effects. Making her way back to Jimmy Olsen, she asks him to wish her out of existence, something he agrees to do. And so following this story, fan reaction to the concept of Supergirl was overwhelmingly positive, with thousands of letters pouring in to the head offices of DC Comics. As a result, Kara Zor-El, the most well-known version of Supergirl, made her appearance in the pages of Action Comics issue number 252 and was created once again by Otto Binder. Providing a true backstory for her character this time, Otto Binder established that Kara Zor-El survived the explosion of Krypton along with her father and her mother and several others. As a result of Krypton's explosion, the chunk of rock they were living on had become an irradiated chunk of kryptonite. Placing a layer of lead on the ground to keep themselves protected, a meteor shower composed of irradiated chunks of Krypton took place and polluted the atmosphere with the effects of green kryptonite. Seeing no option besides sending their daughter away in an effort to save her life, Kara and her mother searched the cosmos, eventually locating Earth. Realizing that Superman had been sent to that planet and had been endowed with superpowers after his arrival, Kara's parents chose that location, and using a rocket ship similar to the ship Superman arrived in, Kara was sent to Earth where she encountered the Man of Steel, was enrolled in an orphanage, and adopted the mantle of Supergirl, remaining hidden from the world, until Action Comics issue number 285, when she was publicly revealed by Superman. And so with their newest creation in hand, Supergirl was rolled over into her own series under Adventure Comics, and alongside Superboy and Krypto the Superdog, opened the door for a host of new characters to be introduced into the Superman family, including Comet the Superhorse, Streaky the Supercat, and Beppo the Super Monkey. By 1962, fans were beginning to notice a trend. With Mort Weisinger operating as the sole editor of all Superman titles and aiming to add something new to the Superman landscape every 6 months, in addition to trying to separate Silver Age Superman from his Golden Age version, almost all continuity prior to his introduction as editor in 1957 was either being completely ignored or rewritten. In 1960, with Adventure Comics issue number 271, at the direction of Weisinger, Jerry Siegel, who had since returned to writing for DC, established that the hatred between Lex Luthor and Superman dates back to the Man of Steel's years as Superboy, when he met Lex Luthor as a teenager. As a fan of Superboy, and looking to become the world's greatest scientist, Luthor had developed an antidote to kryptonite, but when a fire broke out, Superboy used his breath to put it out and destroyed Luthor's experiment in the process. Losing his hair and blaming Superboy by claiming that he was jealous of Lex Luthor's intelligence, the animosity formed by Luthor towards Superboy was used to explain his early appearances in Superman comics and why he had such a hatred for the hero. While some of these changes angered some fans in that their favorite stories from the time between the Silver Age and the Golden Age were being ignored, in the end, it served the purpose of creating a more tight-knit continuity that allowed for existing readers to pick up Superboy titles, read about an encounter, and pick up with its fruition in the Superman titles or one of its related books. With this benefited existing fans, it also began to create a web of nightmares for potential fans. With the introduction of the DC Multiverse in 1961 and the crossovers that came with it, individuals looking to get into Superman comics were met with a massive interweaving of stories that began in one comic and concluded over the course of several others. As a result, these potential fans found themselves frustrated and, in turn, began to take notice of a competitor who was introducing heroes that didn't gain their abilities from a yellow sun, but from the effects of cosmic rays. By 1962, Marvel Comics had introduced the Fantastic Four as a response to DC's Justice League of America. Led by the now infamous duo of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, the Fantastic Four shot the company to instant success, which was then capitalized on with the introduction of Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk, and the Avengers. Forced to share the limelight with their newest competitor, DC had to find ways to make Superman more accessible and fast, or they stood to lose their position as the top company in the world of comic books. To this end, in 1962, under Edmund Hamilton, Action Comics number 293 saw the return of Red Kryptonite. Previously introduced in Adventure Comics number 252 in 1958, over the course of various comics, Red Kryptonite was established to affect Superman in random ways, with no two samples working the same way. Making its return in Action Comics number 293, Edmund Hamilton used this to launch a story titled The Feud between Clark Kent and Superman, which saw a sample of Red Kryptonite splitting the Man of Steel into two distinct personalities, the heroic Clark Kent and the villainous Superman. In 1964, with Justice League issue number 29, DC introduced Earth 3, a universe that existed opposite of the Earth 1 continuity, which saw the first appearance of the Crime Syndicate, a group consisting of evil versions of DC's characters, with this version of Superman called Ultraman. Try as they might, while these stories were aimed at maintaining existing readership while bringing in new readers, it only served to complicate the Superman landscape. And so by 1970, Mort Weisinger had retired from DC after a 30-year career and was replaced by Julius Schwartz, the man instrumental in the success of the Silver Age. Under Julius Schwartz, where Weisinger had a more grandiose view of Superman, Schwartz wanted a more tamed-down version that returned to his Golden Age roots. To achieve this, the various Superman titles were split up, with editor E. Nelson Bridwell taking over Lois Lane, girlfriend of Superman, Mike Sekowsky taking over Adventure Comics, and Murray Boltinoff taking over Action Comics, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, and Superboy, leaving Julius Schwartz in charge of Superman Proper and World's Finest, a line of comics featuring team-ups between Batman and the Man of Steel. Believing that Superman had become too powerful and unrelatable during the era of Weisinger, and that the landscape had become too convoluted, Julius Schwartz brought in Dennis O'Neil, who had been writing the Green Arrow and Wonder Woman titles and alongside the aforementioned editors, cut a swath through the Man of Steel's continuity by eliminating the element of kryptonite, which Schwartz believed had become an overused plot device, canceling the Imaginary Stories line, which served as a series of publications outside of the existing Superman continuity, and rolled Lois Lane, girlfriend of Superman, and Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen titles into Superman Family, which served as an anthology for the previously mentioned comics, among others. In addition to this, Julius Schwartz killed off the villains Mr. Mxyzptlk, Bizarro, and Titano, as well as Krypto the dog, arguably the most famous animal in DC Comics. With comics like 1971 Superman number 233 initiating the Sandman saga, which saw Superman's power reduced, as well as his return to fighting villains on Earth for a majority of his issues, because fans were writing in by the droves requesting a return to cosmic adventures and the threats that came with them, by the time the Sandman saga concluded with Superman issue number 242 in 1971, DC canceled the new Superman line and replaced both Julius Schwartz and Dennis O'Neil with Cary Bates. However, the damage had been done, and following the Schwartz era's conclusion in 1972, where some viewed that the age of Superman was over and that the Man of Steel was rapidly shrinking into oblivion, DC had a plan to not only return Superman to relevance, but to shake pop culture to its core with a story that would change comic books forever.